Rep the South Side whenever you pay with your White Sox debit card from Wintrust Community Banks and score perks like free ATMs, no monthly fees, and a $300 opening bonus. Pay with pride every time with Wintrust, Chicago's bank.
Hey everybody, it's Chuck Garfien. Welcome back to the White Sox Podcast. It's brought to you as always by our great friends at Wintrust, Chicago's bank. Show your team pride with the White Sox debit card. Get yours at wintrust.com/Sox. Member FDIC, EHL lender. Okay, on the podcast today, it's one of my favorites. The one and only, the legendary Steve Stone, to get his wisdom and his baseball perspective with the White Sox as we talk about hope and faith in this White Sox team, all the rookies and the damage they're doing on the field. Colson Montgomery and Edgar Quero, Kyle Teel, etc. And we also look into the future. What's the one free agent Steve Stone would like to see the White Sox sign this offseason? What do you do about 𝗻𝗵𝘶 𝗵𝗹 Jr.? And we also talk about expansion. He's got actually one team in the major leagues moving to another city. No, it's not the White Sox. But you'll want to hear what he has to say about that. So it's Steve Stone on all things baseball, all things White Sox. It is coming your way. Let's do it. All right, back on the podcast for, I believe, the 10th time, maybe 12th time. Steve Stone, you're one of my favorite guests. I appreciate you spending time with me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the introduction, and you're only saying that because I'm here, but outside of that, it's at least 10 or 12. It might be 15.
It might be 20. It might be 20. I mean, at least once, twice a year, I've got to hear from Steve Stone. I need your wisdom and perspective, and this seems like the right time because we've got about a month left in the season. We saw what last year was, and we're seeing what this year is. So what are you seeing from this team, where it is right now, where it was, and where it's going?
Well, I think a lot of fans, if they wanted a monstrous amount of more wins, they probably are disappointed because this team is going to win more than last year. It's not going to win quite as many as a lot of fans wanted it to win. However, there's a couple of different things as we look toward the future. One of them is like the end of last year, there wasn't a whole lot of guys that we felt we could bring forward that were going to be part of the foundation when this team got good. That has changed completely because we've got a lot of very good, very talented young players up this year. We got a chance to see what the farm system became. We got a chance to see that the one weakness of this organization has been on the offensive side because they built with pitching. And so we knew that there had to be some guys who could hit the ball out of the ballpark, could help this team score some runs. And I think by the young guys who came up this year, we are seeing some of the foundation, some of the building blocks for next year and the year after and the year after that when this team becomes very competitive, certainly in their division.
The stat we keep bringing up on the shows is 1-run losses, 2-run losses. You put them all together. As we tape this, they're 15-47 in games decided by 2 runs or less. Do you think that is a talent thing that can be fixed, an experience thing that can be fixed? And how quickly can it be fixed?
I think there's one way to fix it fairly quickly, and it has nothing to do with the offense, which is going to surprise you. But very few teams are competitive. And by competitive, I mean they're playing meaningful games in August and September. You're not going to find teams that are wonderfully competitive that time of year without a very strong back end of the bullpen, meaning they have to have, in my estimation, a bona fide setup man and a bona fide closer. You remember when this Kansas City team, because they're in town, when they won everything, and a couple years in a row, they were knocking at the door one year, won it the next year, and you remember their bullpen. They had 3 of them. They had basically a 7th, 8th, and 9th inning guy, and if they had the lead after 6, the game was over. And they also played very well in 1-run games. That, to me, is the key. I think as far as the runs scored, I think because these guys are going to mature next year, a lot of the young guys we see, I think we'll score more runs. But the key is going to be to hold down the opposition late. When you have the lead late, don't give it up. If you get to be known as a team that plays a 6-inning game, you're going to put a lot more pressure on the other teams because they're going to know if they don't get the lead in the 5th or 6th, they've got big problems later on. We didn't have the luxury of that this year. I think next year we're probably looking at a few guys who at least have the opportunity. We brought in some guys. They talk about Mike Vasil, who did a good job, and you can envision him perhaps being a setup man. Who knows about a closer? Taylor, one of those guys, you look at his stuff and you say, maybe adding one more pitch, there's your closer. All of a sudden, you're starting to see the guys who can be the back end of a bullpen. But as soon as you get that settled, and hopefully next year that will be the year to get it settled, you're going to see a much better record in 1- and 2-run games.
It's amazing to say this right now, but we have more than a month left as we sit here in the season, and the White Sox have already scored more runs than last year. That's how bad the offense was last year. Broadcasting these games, seeing an offense, a real offense, certainly here in the second half, how uplifting has that been for you to watch this, and probably for this fan base as well? And how much do you think this is sustainable? Like what we're seeing from the rookies, do you think this is the future?
Well, I not only think it's sustainable, I think it's going to get better. I mean, obviously, when you take a look at some of these numbers, extrapolate out the numbers for Colson Montgomery. If he was able to do in the last month and a half for a full season, what those numbers would look like. I mean, right now they're about ridiculous. You'd have 50-plus home runs. You'd have 130 runs batted in. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but I will say, thinking of last year and what we thought of Colson Montgomery, and the beginning of this year and what we thought of Colson Montgomery, then all of a sudden he goes down, takes a couple weeks off, works with Ryan Fuller. All of a sudden he reworks that stroke, and now we're looking at a guy, every time he comes up, especially against a right-hand pitcher, he's going to be trouble for them. Not only trouble, but if he hits the ball, we've seen it goes well out of the ballpark. So that's the guy that came up doing exactly what we thought he could do, but wasn't able to do until this forward-thinking organization that we're looking at for the first time with the White Sox. And I have to give credit to 𝗵𝗫 Getz and his front office and 𝗰𝗶𝗟 and his dugout to take these guys and allow them to take the next step. For 𝗵𝗫, it was a question of going out and building some things that this organization never had. The last catcher of substance, and I don't mean to denigrate any of the other catchers that the White Sox developed, but if you think back, it was 1982, and it was 𝗵𝗫𝗃𝗃. I don't think he can do real well these days. So we needed to fill in around that, and we weren't able to develop catchers. And 𝗵𝗫 knew that, along with his staff, and they went out and they made some wonderful trades. We're seeing the result of that. We're seeing Quero come from the Angels. We're seeing Teel come from Boston. We're seeing Lee come from Houston. Yeah. So we're seeing all of these guys come up together, form a really good catching core. We also desperately needed left-hand hitters.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. You brought this up on the air yesterday, and I sent you a text. I'm like, you're speaking to the choir. You're screaming to the choir. Can you elaborate on that, why the last regime didn't, I don't know if they didn't seem to understand the importance of it, but they certainly didn't do enough about it, and the matchup problems that created.
Yeah, well, I mean, they might have understood it. They just, as you say, they didn't do a great deal about it. And again, I'm looking at the perspective of a former right-hand pitcher. I knew that if I got out there with 7 meaningful left-hand hitters against me, especially in ballparks like this, which are tailored for home runs, I probably was going to have a difficult night, a lot more difficult than if I had 7 right-handers. And so why they didn't assemble it, I don't know. But I see these guys come up hitter after hitter. And I see Teel up there, and I see Quero, a switch hitter, but when he hits from the left side. I see Baldwin when he hits from the left side. And obviously Montgomery. These guys hit the ball. They hit the ball consistently, and they cause problems for right-handers. So why it wasn't done, I don't know. I'm thankful that it is done. I've been talking about it for the last 5 years, so it's nice and the better late than never situation. But if you look at this lineup, and you realize that that right-handed starting pitcher out there is going to have his hands full, because if he makes a mistake on a lot of these guys, they're going to hit him hard.
Yeah, Braden Montgomery, switch hitter, so he'll be up here as well. And you look at the last regime, it was Abreu, right-handed, T.A., right-handed, Jimenez, Robert, Vaughn. They did add Benintendi, although that was too late at that point.
Yeah, but don't forget they went out to get a second baseman that they needed desperately, and you got Harrison.
Yeah, that didn't work out.
Well, unless I remember incorrectly, he was also a right-hander.
He was. Your only lefties were switch hitters, Grandal, Moncada.
Yeah, I mean, you took your lineup having a problem with left-hand hitters, and you added more right-handers. Didn't seem to work very well, but It looks like now this lineup is starting to be meaningful.
I want to ask you about 𝗻𝗓ce Robert Jr., who has been so much better in the second half. First half, he had an OPS of .599. Second half, as we tape this, .844 in 29 games. Assuming he continues to play like this for the rest of the season and stays healthy, do you pick up his option? What do you do with 𝗻𝗓ce Robert Jr.?
I do believe. If they weren't going to pick up his option, I could be entirely wrong because I don't have that front office accessibility, and they're not going to tell me what they're going to do anyway. But I do believe that you pick up the option, and then you pretty much do exactly what you were doing this year, which is saying, what am I bid? First of all, the guys that were evaluating 𝗻𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏 the first half of the season probably didn't like what they saw. But the one thing that, if they're paying attention, this guy hustles every day. He runs everything as hard as he can. We saw yesterday in that game, he made 3 highlight reel plays. But he hasn't slacked off defensively. He keeps on stealing bases. He runs every ground ball out to the best of his ability. There's something to be said for that. And the fact is, he's become a much better hitter the second half. I'm not telling you he's going to go back a couple of years ago and hit the 38 and drive in close to 100. But I will tell you, he's a much better player than he played the first half. I believe there are some teams, and I'm not going to tell you who they are, except for maybe the Yankees. No, I can't tell you that. But there are some teams who would really use a center fielder of consequence. And then you get to the point where after you say, what am I bid, you have them make the best offer possible. And if you don't get it, like Chris did at the trade deadline, you just keep 𝗻𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏. This could be a lot worse situation with 𝗻𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏 in center field, because he still catches everything, and he's still very valuable for this team. And if he starts hitting again, then he's real valuable for the team.
All right, putting you on the spot. All right, GM Steve Stone. It is the off season. You look around the diamond. You mentioned bullpen, so that might be your. I'm not going to say bullpen. Well, you know what? Okay, you can just choose what position do you add the most money to this off season.
Well, I think probably the best addition is one of 2 things. One, you go out and get a meaningful left-handed, big-time run producer. That's number 1.
Okay, I'll circle back on that.
Because I really enjoy outscoring the other team on a daily basis. That's pretty.
There's 2 that come to mind.
There's a couple out there, certainly, and obviously they're going to cost you some money. So that's one option. The other option, and I think it's probably a lot less costly, is filling out the back end of your bullpen. Because if you take a look around at most of these teams that are in competition now, you'll realize they have a bona fide closer and a bona fide setup man, or 2 of those guys. Because when you do get the lead late, you want to secure it. You want to make sure you win those games, because nothing tears the heart out of a baseball team more than fighting for the lead in the 7th or 8th inning, and all of a sudden you see the bullpen give it up. When that's the case, that's a big problem for you. It happened to Milwaukee yesterday. They had the lead into the 9th inning. They gave up 2 in the 9th. They wound up losing a game they had to win. Now the Cubs are 5 back. They were 9 back before, so it's starting to get a little tough and tight, in the National League Central. But the back end of that bullpen is of critical importance. I think that's the easiest way to do it. You might have the talent right here. There's some really good arms out there, but you have to. They don't become a setup man or a closer by accident. They have to be designated that, and then you have to teach them how to do it. And the best way to do it is to find a guy who actually did close, that knows what it's like on a daily basis. You bring him in and you start having him talk to your young players about what it takes on a daily basis to close down that opposition. And if you need proof that they're very important, look what happened when 𝗻𝗏𝗏 got suspended from the Cleveland Guardians. Look what the Guardians are doing now, which isn't too good, and they're dropping out of the race.
So you mentioned left-handed power. Are you talking about Kyle Schwarber and Josh Naylor?
Well, I'm telling you that both will be out there. Naylor's going to cost you a lot less than Schwarber's going to cost you. Naylor can also play a position that at this point you're doing a revolving door situation at first. Naylor's one of those guys that you could look and say, you know what, he can drive in some runs. I mean, you're talking about close to 100 runs driven in for a couple straight years. Not that I've been paying attention, but and then you got Kyle Schwarber, who is the elite of that class. You're looking for left-handed power. This guy's been a left-handed power hitter for a long time. He's going to cost you a great deal of money, and I think he might be pricing himself out of this particular half of the market. But certainly there's going to be teams that go after him. You know, you're talking about a guy who's going to hit you 40-plus home runs and drive in 100-plus runs. That's a valuable commodity.
I'm trying not to dream about Kyle Schwarber on the White Sox or Josh Naylor on the White Sox, but I would love to have either of them. They're the perfect fit, I think. And people might say, well, they're not going to win next year. We don't want to have these guys. That's a waste of money. But I feel like what we're seeing right now is an offense that wants to take the next step. And you bring in a guy like that, that's setting the tone for next year and beyond. So what's wrong with trying to get ahead of it and bring in a guy like that? when you can.
Well, there's another factor, too, and it's largely a psychological factor, and that is one of the reasons why these guys, I think, are playing so well as a group, and I'm talking about all these young players. They came up as teammates through the minor leagues, and they had some success. I mean, look at Birmingham this year. You have a whole group of young guys down there, and they're devastating that league. They're playing great. That's what you really want. You want to see all these guys winning together at whatever level they happen to be at. And if it's the major leagues, it's even better for you. And so whether you think this team is going to win next year or not, the question becomes, can you win more games as a group? Because then you get all these young players used to winning as a team. And they come up every day. They see Colson Montgomery. They see Kyle Teel. They see Edgar Quero. These guys are going out there getting big hits for you. And all of a sudden, as a group, all these young guys start to win. And when that happens, and when they start to believe in themselves, don't forget, the Central Division of the American League is not exactly a killer division. So yes, Detroit is pretty good. They're not a super team by any stretch of the imagination. If you don't get 𝗬𝗏, you can actually beat that team. And the same thing with some of the other teams in the division. They're not super teams. It's not going to take a gigantic leap forward for the White Sox to be competitive. And I'm not telling you they're going to be definitively competitive next year. I will tell you, with a couple of additions, this team can be a handful for somebody.
Okay, so this portion of the podcast brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places. What is the next step? What is the next step for the White Sox next year?
The next step is you do, and I'll use the term autopsy because, excuse me, that's what you do when the season is over. You take a look at each and every player. You see exactly what they did, how they did it, when they did it, and what you can envision going forward. Then you look at it and say, okay, what's it going to take to make this team better? And you have every one of your executives in the room. They're going to give you a lot of advice as to what will make this team better. You'll take a look at it and you'll say, okay, we can improve by doing this, this, and this. But then you get down to something that every general manager faces, Chuck, and that is, how much money are you going to be allotted? Because there's a very good general manager out there by the name of Dave Dombrowski who has pretty much won and been competitive everywhere he's gone. However, you take a look at Boston and Philadelphia. They've spent a great deal of money with Dave Dombrowski at the helm. So if you're not going to spend an inordinate amount of money, you've got to be a little bit better in your evaluation of your own players and understand what they need. And by the way, going out and assembling your team with all superstars doesn't guarantee you're going to win, i.e. look at San Diego. They got more superstars than you know what to do with. They can't seem to win. Now, maybe this year is their year. However, it should have been their year for the last couple of years. You have to figure out who best fits on your team and bring them in. And sometimes it's going to be guys that aren't all that expensive, but they play on your club, and that's what the front office is going to have to decide. They're not going to have a big pot of money to deal with in the offseason, so you have to get creative. You have to be a little bit better than everybody else. And I think in judging by this front office and what they've done so far and the guys that 𝗵𝗫 has brought in, you'd have to say they've done a really nice job with what they have to work with.
All right, one last thing I want to talk to you about, and it is expansion and realignment, which is right in my wheelhouse. You have an idea about who's going to be the expansion jackpot winners.
Well, it might not actually be expansion. It can be one of two things. It can be getting a team there because they want to relocate from someplace, and I don't know, maybe that place would be Tampa Bay. I don't know for sure. But
you mean leaving Tampa?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, okay. They never really got to Tampa. That ballpark was in St. Petersburg. However, there is one place that nobody's talking much about, but this place has more visitors than any place in the country by far.
Vegas?
No.
No, okay.
The place is Orlando. Oh. Orlando has 80 million visitors a year because of Disney World and SeaWorld and a lot of other things. 80 million visitors a year come there. It's a very nice city. It's a very large city comparatively. It is the ideal place for either expansion or a relocation of Tampa to go to Orlando. There happens to be a couple of groups that have gotten together. One specifically, they have a couple of guys that lead their group, and they're both billionaires, which is always a good thing because, as you know, expansion is going to cost anywhere from $1.5 billion to $2 billion. And also, you have to do that because baseball doesn't want to bring in any new organization and have to worry about the finances. And so you have that. You have, there's a guy, let's say, if you could get yourself a guy who was, number one, a Hall of Famer just saying that this guy might be out there. He might be interested in this. Let's say he was a really good player, and he happens to live in Orlando, which, by the way, this idea actually would make a couple of guys who have White Sox ties very happy. One, 𝗵𝗁 𝗟𝗏, and the other, 𝗂𝗍𝗶 𝗟𝗏 would be pretty happy because he lives down there. And the guy that I'm talking about that's a Hall of Famer who would like to get involved with this is a guy, you might remember him, played a little shortstop named Barry Larkin.
Oh, interesting.
He's one of those guys that
lives in Orlando.
He lives in Orlando. Might be interested in this situation, and also it seems like they have lots of their ducks in a row. So I'm not telling you this is what's going to happen. What I'm telling you is that this is an ideal place. We'll see if baseball decides that it's an ideal place. And they have to expand by 2 teams.
Yes.
And the reason they do is they got to get to 32 teams because there's a lot of reasons why, but let's look at just one. Nobody in the American League East wants to see Boston playing Colorado in September because one's in the National League and the other's in the American League. They want to see them play New York. They want to see them play Baltimore. They want to see them play in the division. If you add 2 teams and have 32 teams, and you mentioned 8-team divisions, I mentioned 8 4-team divisions, but either way, you're going to be able to not have to play interleague play every day of the season. That's what happens now with 30 teams. So go to 32. You can play in the division both to start and to end the season, and your fans are going to be very happy because they're going to see those teams that you have to beat your competitors in the last month and a half of the season.
All right, so lots unpacked there. And there's a previous podcast I did with Mike Farron last week if you want to go into that a little further and listen to that. But so would you put the White Sox and Cubs in the same division?
I certainly would. I can't see why not. I'd put the Yankees and the Mets in the same division. I mean, this sport is built on a couple of different things. One, it's built on history and their stars, and the other, it's built on competition, and it's built on familiarity, and it's built on your competitors, your teams that your fans want to see you play. You think the fans of these 2 teams want to see the Cubs and the White Sox play in the same division?
So I think most do, but then I'm also hearing it on Twitter, X, whatever it might be, that they don't want to see that. It's too much Cubs, White Sox, but I disagree with that. Let's bring it. Let's keep doing it. And I'm hearing people say that it's going to be too regionalized. Well, it already is very regionalized because how many times are the White Sox playing the Royals and the Twins and the Tigers? Add the Brewers, add the Cubs. That's what I want to see. I think that would be great for the fans. We're speaking the same language here. I just think there should be 8. I like 8-team divisions. You like 4.
I like 4 because I want to give everybody a chance to get into the playoffs. And with 4, you have to have 1 winner. So you're going to have 8 teams there for sure. Yeah,
but if it's 8-team divisions, you can have the top 4 make it, and then that still is 4.
The top 4 make it in how many divisions are we going to have?
4.
So 16 teams in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of teams in the playoffs. But
bring it. That's what I want.
Yeah. I mean, I like the fact. I like the emphasis on winning the division. That's important, especially when you play the kind of schedule they're playing now, which is called the
a gauntlet.
The balanced schedule. I mean, I like the fact that you're playing every team in baseball once a year.
Yeah.
Some years you play them here, some years you play them there. For instance, you see 𝗻𝗏 every other year in your ballpark, whereas before, when we played the unbalanced schedule, we saw him once every 6 years. I don't think it's good for baseball to see the stars once every 6 years. I want to see them every other year. That's why I like to see everybody playing everybody.
All right, so you've got the Rays moving to Orlando. Who are the expansion teams?
Well, I don't know if the Rays are going to move because...
So this is your theory. I mean,
No, I mean, it could very well be. I think Orlando should have a baseball team regardless if it's a relocation or it's an expansion, because I believe that is and will be kind of the hottest city in Florida for a team, and you're going to want to put another team in Florida. So that's one of the things. I don't know exactly what is going to happen with that. I do know that there's a lot of cities that really want a baseball team. It's wonderful to have the summertime. You get to go to the park and you get to see the major league stars. That's terrific. Hopefully we can expand that to 2 other cities that have really well-capitalized ownership groups, because the last thing baseball needs is any more financial difficulties.
All right. Well, this has been great. It's always great talking with you, Steve Stone. As I just feel so much better about the team. Even though you look at the standings, you're like, oh, this team's in last place. But they're so much more competitive, and I just have more hope for the future. Do you agree?
Just take a look, Chuck, at the guys that you might consider to be building blocks or the foundation for the future. We didn't have any last year. We have a bunch of them this year, and with that, an addition or two. And by the way, this isn't the end result of this farm system. There's a lot of quality down there still. They will probably be up next year. There's good players all over the diamond. We just have to find them, bring them up here, get them ready, and fill in to what we're going to bring forward from this year.
And there'll be a top 5 pick, hopefully. It should be next year. Maybe even the number 1 pick in the draft. Steve Stone here on the White Sox Podcast. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Chuck. It was great doing it, and hopefully we'll do it again before, the end of this decade.
You're contractually obligated to be on at least once a year. Steve Stone, the great Steve Stone here on the White Sox Podcast. 𝗻𝗁𝗏 𝗟𝗏, take it away.
All right, Chuck, this edition of the White Sox Podcast is over.